you make the time. So yeah, they're just not serious. If they're able to watch the recording, that's fine. If they can't, that's also fine. That's their life. So I don't know where to start, but I'm gonna start with if statements, right? A loop is a modified version of an if statement. I want you to know that because especially if you're measuring in comp sci, you're gonna in final year you're gonna use um you're gonna use an if statement to make a loop in comp sci 3B. So it's best to understand it now. So if you guys remember if statements, we are checking for a condition we're checking for when a condition is true or for when a specific condition is met. So for example, I'll just make a simple example, right? So for example, let's say you want to check if it is raining. So you would have to use the if keyword to say if something here, which is some condition, right? We put some condition here that needs to be true. So what is the condition? Let's say if it is raining, for example, then within curly braces, you do something when the condition is true, basically when it is raining, right? So, okay, you should phrase it more as a question, not just, yeah, it should be, is it raining? And then if it is true that it's raining, that's when you do that. Else, it's false, meaning that it's not raining. If the guys to remember that if statement, right? This basic if statements, right? You're checking if a specific condition is true or if something has happened, right? For example, has it rained? Is it sunny outside? Things like that. That's what the if statement is good for, right? For checking those situations. So we can modify let's just use only a single if statement, right? Let's not put up else, all those things. That's not the important thing that I want to demonstrate because you don't need the else part or the else if part to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So if you look at an if statement, right, it checks this condition once and then it stops. What if you want to keep on checking that condition? You keep on checking that condition. How do you achieve that? You can do it using an if statement. So I'm going to show you this is to be honest, this is actually very advanced, the one I'm about to show you. It's like final year type of like level, but it's fine because Dr. Stugu doesn't really care about you guys, that you guys are beginners. I've seen his practicals. It genuinely doesn't care about you guys. That's a fact. If it cared, he would have made the practicals easier. He made the practicals way hard. So I'm going to call this loops, right? I could have called it practical, whatever, that's fine. So I'm just gonna call it loops. So I don't like this. Just give me a sec. Let me do this. I don't like the color, the theme. So I'm gonna say code blocks dark theme. Uh GitHub. And then this is the guy. So I need this file over here. And then download the file. Is it okay? It's done. So it's done downloading. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my code blocks. Okay, I shouldn't have closed it. Let me open it again. It's not showing me that option, which is weird. There's an option that I want to see. Okay, let me just try to compile this. It runs right. Hello world. Then I'm going to close. So I've run it at least once. Then I'm going to open something called cb share config. This is the file this is the app that you use to change the theme. So I'm gonna look for the theme. Damn, I don't know where it is. This is a bad idea. It's fine. I'll change it later. I don't know where its location is. I wanted to change the theme. I don't like white. That's too plain. So there's the project, right? So I'm gonna, yeah, don't do what I'm about to do, right? I just want to, let me see, view perspectives minimal. Yeah. I don't want to see all these other things on my screen. I just want to have only this. So this is the code, right? So to do an if statement, if you guys still remember, you can have a condition in the if statement. So for example, let's say I have int number, right, is equals to 0. This looks weird when I've never used white before like this. So int number is equals to 0, and then you check, you can do an if statement to check for a specific. Basically, the if statement is to ask a question. And then if that question is true, then we do something. So what question do we want to ask? We want to ask if the number is positive. So if number is greater than 0, what counts as a positive number? It's a number that's greater than 0. You can say greater than or equals to 0, but remember 0 is neither negative nor positive. So that's why I'm just gonna say is greater than 0. Then I'm gonna output the message number is positive, right? And then I'm gonna put an end of line character. Remember, the end of line character simply, this ENDL simply means end it, they end the line there. Meaning when it sees the C out in the next line of my code, it means that it shouldn't continue here, like outputting that message by C out. It should output it in the next line, because I told the compiler or C++ that the line ends here. Don't display anything after, basically don't display anything after E. That's what ENDL means. So that means everything will be displayed in the next line. So that's what ENDL stands for. So I'm just going to build and run. And oh, I was supposed to initialize it to a positive number. Let's say 20. So now the output will be the number is positive. But you see that it only did it once, right? It did it once. That's the limitation of an if statement. What if, in my case, right, I want to count? For example, let's make a simple example. Let's say I want to count, right? Let's say I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I want to count from 1 to 10. Let's say that's a simple application we're trying to solve. I want to create a counter or something that's going to count for me, right? So how would I do that using an if statement? Let's just try to do that. Let's say I start at 1, right? Obviously. And I need to stop at 10. So that means this thing should continue. So the condition would be if the current number that's being displayed is less than what, or equals to 10. As long as that's the case, because remember I should stop at exactly 10, including 10. But then remember that number can still be less than 10. As you can see, I'm starting at 1, and 1 will always be less than 10. 2 will be less than 10. 3 will be less than 10. So that's why I'm saying less than or equals to 10, right? Simple, right? Then I'm just going to output that number. So just output the number, and then followed by a space after that number, because I want it to be displayed in one row like this, right? Yeah, it's a row, yeah, in one row like this. So I'm going to build and run, and you see that there's a problem. It only runs once. So I'm only seeing 1. So we have a problem here. How do I make it count? So there's something very advanced in C++, not too advanced to be honest, if you think about it. It's actually not advanced. So before we continue, right? Remember that after outputting this number, I need to update it. I need to increase by 1. Remember, you start at 1, and then you increase by 1, or you increment by 1 to get 2. Then you add 1 to 2 to get 3. So that means that at each step, I'm increasing by 1, right? So that means after I display the number, I move to the next number by increasing the current number by 1. How do you do that? You say number is equals to number plus 1. which means that, remember equal sign, we talked about the equal sign, right? Or the assignment operator. This is actually not an equal sign, it's an assignment, meaning you do what's on the left and you do what's on the right hand side first and find the number or a value, then you assign it, or you put it you put it inside of this box with this label. So currently number is 1. So that means it's going to say 1 plus 1, which is 2, and then store 2 into number. Then in the next step, it's remember next step number is now 2. Then it's going to say 2 plus 1, which is 3, then store 3, and then next step 3 plus 1, and so forth. That's what I'm trying to achieve using code, right? So since this adding 1 in C++ is so common that there's shortcuts of writing this because it's very common. You can write it like this. That's the first approach, plus or equals to. Then the last approach would be, okay, there's many approaches. You can say plus plus like this, or you can say plus plus here. So you see that there's like 4 ways to do this. So choose what you feel like doing, or an approach that you're more comfortable with. So it still doesn't solve my problem, right? You notice that it runs only once. How can I make it run multiple times? Well, in C++, this thing called jump statements, meaning jump, right? Just like if I was to ask you to jump, I agree you're going to jump up, right? So it's sort of like that. It's sort of like jumps in a way. So what you do is you create what we call a label. So this if statement, you give it a label so that when you want to jump to go there, you know where to go. So let's say I'll call this if statement, right? And then I put a colon like this. So this will be my label. I hope this is correct. Let me try to build. The thing is, I do many languages, so yeah, it's correct. It's also possible in Java, so I needed to be sure. So you give it any name. I'm just saying start. You can call it start. Let's call it start, right? Because that's where my if statement starts here at the top. So this label, I now have a label. I can tell C++ to keep on going to that label or to go to that label. I want you to listen to the words I'm using. I can tell C++ to go to that label. I can tell C++ to go to that label. The same way I'm saying go to, there's a keyword inside C++ called go to, which means go to a specific label. So go to start. And then you put a semicolon to end. Remember, in every statement in C++ is terminated by a semicolon, which is the same behavior as a full stop in every language, which means that sentence ends there. In this case, we don't call them sentences, we call them statements. So this is how this is going to work. It's gonna go to this label. Oh, this is a label, and then check this condition. If it's true, then run what's inside here. Let's look at step 1. It's gonna output a number. Then we increment by 1, meaning we move to the next number. So now number becomes 2. Then we tell C++ to go to that start label, meaning it's gonna go back up there at start. And then it checks the condition if it's true, because remember now number is 2 because we increased here. Number is 2. Then it's going to output 2. Then number, it gets incremented. Currently it's 2. When you add 1 to 2, it becomes 3. Now number is 3. Then it says this go to statement goes to the top again. So the only time this thing will stop is when what? This is false. Because I put a label for my if statement. And remember, if statements, it only runs if the condition or the Boolean expression is true. The part that I've highlighted, we call this a Boolean expression. Boolean expression because it's an expression that returns a bool. And if you remember, a bool type is true or false. That's what it means. That's why they're calling it a Boolean expression. So this is basically how a loop works. So I'm giving you very advanced things. Yeah, I'm teaching you very advanced things. But if you look at it, to be honest, I think you guys should understand what's going on, because there's the keyword go to. It means go to that label. So it's going to go back to line 8, line 9, and then it goes down again. Because remember, a computer, when it reads, the compiler, when it's reading your code, it reads from top to bottom. So it's going to go to line 9, then go to the next line, go to the next line, go to the next line, and so forth until it reaches line 15. But then line 15, you're telling it to go back up to line 9. So go to, meaning go to a line where that label exists, which is line 9. So before I continue, do you guys have any questions? Because you need to really understand each part of this first before we try to convert it to a loop. Do you guys understand? Any questions so far? Okay, let me go back here. If you have no question, can you put a thumbs up? If you have no question, just put a thumbs up. There should be somewhere where you can choose an emoji or something. Okay, and do me, put a thumbs up if you have no questions. I want to make sure we are all on the same page before I continue. Okay, I'm just gonna assume you have no question because me waiting for your response kind of wastes time. So this is the if statement, right? So I basically invented my own loop. So basically I created the loop, then I used the loop, which is a very long step because it comes pre-installed in C++. Magic, right? You say that it's now outputting all the numbers, right? Because you understand what you're doing. If you understand what you're doing, you can do pretty advanced stuff. So this is how a loop works. Basically, we are repeating, we are forcing the if statement to repeat. But then since they notice that this takes a lot of time, you see this label, and then you have to use go to, and then that takes a lot of time. So, and sometimes you might make a mistake and forget to update. Remember, if you don't change this number, this condition will always be true. So for example, this line here, you see, I actually do change number. So eventually number becomes big enough that it makes this condition false. If I commented out this line, you see so many ones, and we call this an infinite loop, meaning it runs an infinite number of times. It never stops running. So let me put it run, which is very wrong. You see the problem with not updating your conditions. And then to exit, you press Control C. Is it Control C or Control X? I forgot, but just it's fine. You can just press X. Yeah, don't do this, right? Don't make that mistake of forgetting to update. So the statement that updates our we call, you see inside this case, right? Inside this if statement, we would call this number, this variable number, a loop variable, meaning it's a variable that belongs to that loop. In this case, it belongs to an if statement, but technically it's a loop because I invented my own loop. Then now let's try to convert this to using a loop. So let's start with something easy. Let's start with the while loop because the while loop is more easy to see. It's similar to exactly this structure. So let's use a while loop, right? Using a while loop, you use simply, I want you to notice something. If you see that the only thing that changes, I just change if to while. It's still the same structure as an if statement, if you notice. You see there's if and then this. The only thing that changes is the if and then it becomes a while. Because like I said, a while loop is an advanced if statement. It's a modify. It's like when I don't know if you'd watched that show, Pimp My Ride. This is like your old Tez, right? And then you take it to Pimp My Ride and they pimp it. They make it cooler, right? They make it dope. So yeah, it's the same thing that I was also doing here. I had a normal if statement and then I pimped it. I upgraded the if statement to loop using statement the go-to command or the go-to keyword. So let's look at it. You see that it's going to be very similar. The same condition here, it comes here. Same thing, exactly same thing. So far, I think you can see that these things are similar. And then the only difference here, right, is that you only put these two statements here. So imagine under the hood, there's an invisible go-to and an invisible label. So they saved you time on having to type go to or start label or create labels, and they saved you that time. So that's why they created a loop like this. So with the while loop, right? If remember if a normal if statement without this go to statement, and it's a normal if statement runs exactly once. So since it runs exactly once, sometimes you want it to run multiple times. So there's limitations. That's why they made a while loop to say while this is true, keep on doing this. Then it's gonna go back up. Is it still true? Run the code yet. It goes back up. Is this still true? It runs the code, goes back up until this eventually becomes false. Remember what I said, if you don't have a statement that updates the variable in your condition, the loop will never stop running. And to be honest, you can actually potentially damage your laptop if you have a loop that's infinite, that doesn't stop running. So be very careful with that. Always have a statement that updates the variable that's inside the condition. Else the condition will always be true. So you'll notice that this will be exactly the same thing. So let me put a comment here. Yeah, so I'll just comment out this if statement, right? And you see that this is the while loop. Remember, anything inside a comment, C++ ignores it. So it's going to run anything that's not a comment, which is this statement over here. And this is also not a statement. It's not also a comment. So it's going to run this and that. But then remember top to bottom. So it's going to start here, run this, run this, run this, read this line. It ignores everything that's a comment here. And then it says, oh, there's a while loop. It checks if it's true. So a while loop, we call this, we call this a pre-test loop, right? Pre-test meaning, remember pre means before. So it tests before it goes into the loop. So that means this loop can actually not even run at all. So it runs zero or more times. So that means it can not, there's a possibility of it not running at all. So that's something you need to understand about the while loop. So let me build and run. This time around it will run. So you see, I achieved the exact same thing I wrote using an if statement. But then they wrote it for you, that while loop, so that you don't have to type, go to labels, so you don't have to do all that extra work, because you have to also come up with fancy, nice labels for labels for the loops, which is sometimes a problem. So that's gonna waste time. Instead of coming up with all those things, you see how neat this is. I have while, and then I have that. And then remember, I told you that a while loop is called a pre-test, meaning it tests before going inside the loop. So that means the loop can actually run 0 times. Then we have what we call a do while loop. So what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to show you that I'm going to try, you see, I'm going to write all statements, right? All if statements. Okay, not all of them. Let me see. Yeah, not all, not all loop, except for the for each loop. The for each loop I'll explain that when we actually do the practical. The other ones I can uh, I can convert this while loop to all the other loops. So let's go to the do while. So do while. You'll notice that the output will always be the same. It's just a different way or different types of loops. You'd have to understand how they work and use the one that works for you. So with the do while loop, we use the do keyword, and you can see something here. I agree, you don't see brackets here and the condition, right? So this is what we call a post test loop, meaning that it tests after running something. So this is a post test loop, meaning post is after, pre is before. So post, it means it tests the condition after. As you can see, the while keyword is at the end there. So this is the syntax for a do while loop. So it means, I want you to read it in this way. It means do this while this is true. So as you can see, it says do this. So it can do it. It can actually do something even when the condition is wrong. So that means it runs at least once. So a do-while loop, you use a do-while loop when you have a problem whereby it's supposed to run at least once. That's when you use a do-while loop. If it doesn't matter whether it should run once or okay, let's say it shouldn't run once, at least once. It should run only when it's actually true. Then you use a while loop. Because the while loop, if it's not true, it doesn't even run at all. So it's all about the problem you're solving. Remember, all we are doing right now, we are teaching you, we are teaching you the tools, basically giving you tools to put in your toolbox. Then from time to time, you see a problem that requires that tool, you go into your toolbox, you take it out, you use that tool. So if you see a problem that requires a do-while loop, you go to your toolbox, you take the do-while loop, and then you use it. Because that practical or that problem requires you to solve it using the do-while loop. So while, and then there's my condition here, number less than or equals to 0. And then C out, and then this, right? Exactly same thing. But then the difference is that this runs at least once. That's the difference. And the output might actually be different. Let's see. So I'm going to comment this out again because I don't want it to run. I want to run the do while loop so that we see that the output is still the same. Hope so. Yeah, it's still the same. So 1 to 10, so the exact same answer. It's just different techniques or formulas. Remember in maths, right? You can have two different formulas that give you the same answer. It's like a different approach or different way of thinking it. For example, if I ask you, let's say you're staying here in Brixton, right? And I ask you, can you direct me to where Campus Square is? There's many ways you can walk to Campus Square, but eventually you get to the location or to your destination, right? So it's the same thing with loops. They all do the exact same thing. It's just different, slight differences between them. So another reason for using a while loop, right, is when you don't know exactly how many times this thing is going to be repeated. When you don't know how many times it's going to be repeated, use a while loop. And then when you still don't know how many times it's going to be repeated, but you want your code to run at least once, then use a do while loop. Then a for loop, and then I'm going to comment this out. You'll see that all this code is exactly the same thing. It's just different. There's a difference in doing it. A for loop, right? It's similar because you see that here there used to be a while, but then now there's a for, right? For, and then we have what you call the declaration, and then you put a semicolon. This is where you declare the variable for the loop. And then here we have the Boolean expression. This is what is the Boolean expression? Anything that returns true or false. For example, this is what goes here. And then semicolon, then we have the update statement, which is to update, meaning, remember what I told you, this will go on forever if we don't update our loop variable. Just as we've seen that there was a lot of ones being displayed and it never stopped. That's why we need to update our variable. So let's do that. Let's declare. So since I'm using the for each loop, right, or that for loop, I'm going to comment this out because I can just declare it here. Then I'm going to say int number is equals to 1. Because this is the part for declaration. You declare the variable that's supposed to be used within this for loop. Since this variable is declared as part of this for loop, we call that a loop variable, meaning it only exists starting from this curly brace here, and it stops existing when you see this curly brace. So if you try doing spiritual things like see out number after the curly brace, crash, because it only belongs, you can only use it here. You see here, this is where you can only use number. If you use it outside this closing curly brace, it's going to ask you this question. It's going to be like, where are you getting this one from? I don't know that. Because now you're outside of this loop. So it's going to check at the top there and it says there's no number at the top declared. So where are you getting it from? So that's C++. You need to really understand it. And then the Boolean expression is basically a condition whereby we can get true or false, which is, for example, this. We're asking in the question, is number less than or equals to 10? If it is, then the loop starts. If it's not, so the for loop, right? This for loop, it's similar to a while loop, meaning you can run 0 times if this condition is false. You see, if it's false, you can run 0 times, meaning it won't even display anything. Then we need our update statement here. So plus plus number, where we update the variable number. So this is the code to update it, to add, to increment by 1 or add 1 to the current variable, so that eventually it becomes bigger than 10 and we stop this repetition. Because if we don't update it, this repetition will go on forever. So you need to be very careful. You need to update it the right way. So here I'm going to output that number and then followed by a space. And you see that's going to work exactly the same way. Then I'm going to comment out this code. Right, and then boom, same answer. Exact same answer. It's just different ways of doing it. But eventually you get the same answer. Just keep that in mind. Then, yeah, we are done demonstrating loops, right? This is always the syntax for the loop. And you can remember this part over here, right? This part over here, it's anything that returns true or false. So I can even do this and say, and number is, I can do that. I can expand it, even though the textbook doesn't show you this, but you can do that because at the end of the day, it's going to return true or false. And then here, remember the rule in C++, if you have multiple variables of the same data type, you can declare them separated by a comma. So I can say number, then I say x is equals to 0. But then remember all those variables that you've declared in the declaration part, meaning before this first semicolon, those variables you've declared here, they can only be used in between this curly brace and that curly brace. Use it outside error. So let me show you that I'm not lying. Let me try to see out number after that curly brace. I'll just build it. You see that's going to show an error. And then you're going to see how surprising the error is. It will tell you that it's not declared. So if I go back here, so you see, so I didn't lie, so that you guys don't think this guy is full of lies. Let me do this. So you see, number was not declared, meaning number does not exist. Then you're gonna be like, Mara, no, it exists. Well, it doesn't exist because there's this thing called a loop variable, meaning it only exists in the loop. You go outside the loop, it's no longer existent. So that's why this line give you an error. And then, yeah, that's pretty much a loop. And then the for each loop, right? It's the for each loop is you're gonna have some declaration here or some, let's just say some variable, right? And then you're gonna have some collection here, right? Meaning multiple things. For example, a string. Let's see a string. Hello world. A string it has multiple letters. It is H plus E plus L plus O and so forth. So you can use the for each loop when you have, for example, things like strings, because we can say here, so each of these things, right? Remember in our world, right, on Earth, we call them letters of the alphabet, right? In programming, they're called characters or char. So that's why when we come here, we use the char type, because each of these letters that's going to be returned, it's of char type. Then you can call it C, and then here you're going to have your string. Let's say str hello. That string is called str hello. Hello. Then what happens? This is what happens. At each step, this is what happens. C is going to take the value of H, the first letter here. And then once it reaches here, it goes back up to the top. And then C stores the next letter, which is E. And then stores L, stores O, stores a comma, stores the space, this space over here. it stores the W, it stores the O, it stores the R, stores the L, stores the D, and then it's done. And then it finally exits, it finally stops. So to test this, I can output the to show you that it does work. But then remember, string is a class, right? So we're actually creating a string object. You learn that in second semester. So we're calling an object. So str hello is equals to hello world. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to output each letter on its own line, so that you don't think that it's only displaying the full string. Let me show you what I mean by that. If I just say output C out C, remember it's going to store the first letter, which is H, right? So in my output, I'm going to have H. Then it's going to store C is going to have the next letter, which is E. Then I display E. So eventually it's going to form that same word again. And then you would think that is not storing each letter at a time. So let me show you. So let me build and run. You see hello world in one line. So you see there's hello world. You won't think or you won't know that it actually stores a character or a letter at a time. So that's why I want to display each letter on its own line. Then I'm going to comment out that code. So I'm going to put an end of line character, so that it displays each letter on a new line. Then I'm going to build and run. And then boom. So you see that I'm not lying. The variable C, it stores one letter at a time. You see, it stored L, stored L, stored O, stored that comma, stored that space. Because the space is still a space, it's still something, it's a character. W stored O until we reach the last letter. So that's what a for each does, for each loop does. You need to have the variable that's on this right-hand side here. It needs to be something that is multiple things. In this case, it's only a string. For you guys, it's only a string for now. In second semester, or not even second semester, when you start doing arrays, you can use that's another useful place to use it for each loop. So let me close this. Close. So I hope you guys understand. So this is all the examples for loops. Then now we can start working on the project, right? On the practical. So let's do that. I wanted to demonstrate, right, like using a diagram, but then I see that it's gonna kind of take time, so we're not gonna touch on that. I tried to explain it using code and examples. I hope that loops are a bit straightforward now, or you can understand them a bit better now, or have a clue. Even having a clue is something. So your program should present the user with the following options, right? So you need to have option A, option B, option C, option X. So let's you do options. Remember last week, your practical was based on switch statements, if statements, all those things. A switch statement is used only when you have multiple options. That's where a switch statement is useful. That's why I'm telling you, it's very important to understand when to use what, because you can use something in a wrong place. For example, you can say, this, you want to realize that it becomes untidy. You can't keep saying option A is equals to the letter A, or it can be a small letter. You see, that's unnecessary. You can use a switch statement for that. So before we do that, let's create the char variable, the char type, right? So this will be ch option. I'm going to initialize it to null, right? So it's equals to null. We talked about it. It's the same as like for numbers when you say int number is equals to 0, meaning there's nothing in there. So that's what that null stands for, meaning there's nothing inside this variable ch option. There's nothing in it. Then we need to output, because remember, it's important for the user to know what are the options available. So you need to tell them option A, output a sequence. Option B, calculate the sum of n what. Option C, convert a string to convert an input string into the reverse, basically reverse a string. And then option X, exit. So we need to do that. So let's output the options. So I need to use C out. So C out, I'm going to say A, option A is what? Output the sequence. Right, don't worry, I'm going to send you the code in the group now. And then remember this \n, right? It's another way to say ENDL, right? It's another way to do that. So I'm just choosing to do it in this way. There's more, like I said, there's multiple ways to solve something. I just choose to do it this way because I just feel like doing it that way. So option B is to output the sum of of what numbers. So the sum of what numbers. So output the sum. So here I need to write I don't know what was that. And then I'm gonna put a \n so that it moves to the next line. And then output the next option C, which is to reverse the string, right? So option C, which is to reverse a string. And then option X is to exit the program. So option X is to exit the program. And then \n, and then done. I want you guys to notice something about syntax. You can do it this way, but then make sure you omit semicolons. Don't put semicolons in every line here. It's going to crash. So you only put it at the end here. If you want to write it in the way I did it. So basically you use C out only once. If you put a semicolon here, C++ expects another C out here. So C out here. And then if you put another semicolon here, it also expects a C out in the next line. So I don't want to keep typing C out. That's why I am doing it this way. So if you look at this code, right, there's no semicolons here. So let me build it. Let me just build it, right, to see that there's no error. Let me put that semicolon and you see an error now. You see, there's the error. It's telling me in the next line, I was supposed to say C out. So make sure you understand that difference. So even if you use what is this ENDL like this, don't put that semicolon. Just leave it like that with ENDL. Me, I chose to use the \n approach. It's up to you which approach you want to use. Like I said, there's multiple ways to solve this. Then now, since we have displayed the options to the user, we can now get input from the user. So what before I do that, I don't like how, let me show you how the program is going to look. Okay, before I do that, let's get the option, right? So cin ch option, right? So we're getting our input and it's being sent to that variable. Hence, I use the two greater than symbols to show the direction of where the input is going. So you see, I don't like this. It's not clear when the user should enter. So they should just predict that this small line here means enter the input. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to output another string that says enter your choice or enter option. So I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna say C out, and then I'm gonna say enter your choice like this, right? And then I don't move. Remember, if you do this or you put ENDL here, this means that we still have the same problem because it's gonna move to the next line. Let me show you. So you see, it moved to the next line. It's here. I want it here. I want it here. I want the user to type there. So I'm gonna remove that ENDL or that end line, and it'd be like leave it like this. So the user enters the answer in the same line of that string. So you see, there's my string here. So now the user knows, oh, these are my options. And then this is now time for me to enter a choice. So I choose option A, and then it captures, and then so forth, right? So far, so good. But then this can also go wrong. I am not going to validate because this session will become very, very long. I'm not going to test if the user entered the right thing. I'm going to assume that the user knows what they're doing. They're going to enter the right information. So I'm just going to go straight to my switch statement, because remember I talked about switch statement being useful when it comes to options. This variable here, ch options, it has multiple values that you can store. You can store the letter A, whether small letter or uppercase letter, lowercase or uppercase letter B, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, letter C. So there's multiple values or multiple choices to be made. Therefore, I'm going to choose the switch statement. CH option. So this is syntax for switch statement. You use the switch keyword, and then you pass the variable that you want to check the values of. Then you say case, followed by the value that you want to check if that variable has that value. So which value do you want to check? If it has the value A and small lowercase letter A. And then if it also has the uppercase letter B, A, I mean, and then it should solve for those cases. Then I put the break. So it does what we call a follow through, right? It means that it's gonna keep on, it's gonna solve, output the same answer for all the cases until it sees a break statement. If I was to put a break here, right, that means that if you had entered a small letter A, it will do something different than when you have entered the uppercase letter A. But that's not what I want. I want it to do this exact same thing. So I'm going to put the break only after the second case. So then here there's multiple ways you can do it here, this part. You can put curly braces like this to group your stuff, or you can just not put them. That's up to you. But I'm going to put curly braces so that it makes my code look neat. So I'm going to put the curly braces there. Then we're going to have cases for B. So case smaller letter B. And then case B again. And then break. And then case C. And then case uppercase letter C. No, semicolon. No, colon, I mean. And then case X. Um, oh, I just realized something. Remember here, they said, let's see. Yeah, the program, there's option X for the program to exit. Why would they put that option to exit? Why would you exit if you can only choose one option? So basically, I think for this practical, what they're expecting you to do is to continuously run the loop, to basically continuously ask the user for these options until they enter the letter X to exit. If they enter the letter X to exit, then the loop stops. That means it stops asking them for options. So that means my switch statement should actually be inside of a loop, according to this practical, even for your practical too. So this will be letter X, right? Small letter X, and then case, uppercase letter X, and then break. And then we also need to include default because the user can enter spiritual things, right? Meaning incorrect answers. So default means that it was none of the above. And if it's none of the above, that means the user entered something incorrect, something wrong. So we need to tell the user that you entered something wrong. Then curly braces there. So there's my switch statement, right? And I want you to notice something. Look at how neat my code is. Make sure your code is very neat, because when the neater the code is, the easier it is to find errors. That's something that I would really advise. People are not neat out there. Make sure your code looks neat. So I'm gonna exit this, and then I'm gonna use a do while loop, right? So remember, what we talked about loops, right? There's different types of loops. We have the do while loop, we have the while loop, we have the for loop, we have the for each loop. So in this case, in this scenario, which loop can we use? So I'm gonna to get to the conclusion, right? I'm gonna ask myself, how many times will the user ask? How many times should I ask the user to choose an option? Well, I do not know. Since I do not know, I cannot use a for each loop and a for loop because those two loops, they only work when you know exactly how many times you're going to repeat something. So I'm left with a while loop and a do while loop. To be honest, either way it's fine. Either one is fine. But I'm gonna choose for a do. I'm gonna choose to use a do while loop. Why a do while loop? Because I want my user to at least have one chance to get to be asked an option. So that's why I'm using a do while loop. Because remember, do while loop, it runs at least once. So I'm gonna use a do while loop. So while, and a do while loop is better because why? As you're gonna notice something, why a do while loop is important. Yeah, it is important. In this case, I would definitely advise you to use a do while loop. So what is the condition that's gonna make us keep staying in the loop? We need to ask ourselves, how do we exit the loop? By entering X. So that means this value CH option should have X when what? When the user should exit when CH option is equals to X. So that means while CH option is not equals to X, right? Okay, remember the user can enter a lowercase letter X or an uppercase letter X. So I have to say or. The option is not equals to X. So I'm going to use an or because the user can enter one of a small letter or an uppercase letter. But remember something, I'm going to explain something very important here. There's my switch statement, right? Then I need to shift it to make it look neat. And then there we go. You see, everything's neat. There's order here in my code. So it's going to remember how the do while loop works. It's going to say do, and then it does this. And then after it is done doing that, it's going to check the option here. Did the user enter X or not? If the user entered X, then it breaks. It's going to stop because this will be true. Okay, let me see. Let me think about this condition. Yeah, loops are very tricky. You need to really think about it. So if while CH is not equals to, oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it is going to be fine. Yeah, it's going to be fine. So this will be the condition. I think even for a practical, you can basically I'm doing the memo. Just that I'm not telling you that I'm doing the memo for your guys' practical, but I'm actually doing the memo. Just a different practical, but it's similar. So what I can do, right? There's this word break. See, there's the break keyword, right? But then it's a problem. You see, think break and what it's a problem. So since I already checked the option here, I don't need to add it here as a case. Because when you enter X, the app should do nothing. So there's no need for me to say case X because the app does nothing when you enter X. It basically actually stops. So I'm just going to remove that option and only be left with A, B, C, and default. But then, okay, it's going to be tricky. Let me see. Yeah, let's do this. Let me put back X because if I put back default, default will also run when you enter X, which is a problem. So it shouldn't, yeah, it's fine. Let's leave it this way. So when you enter X, what should happen? Nothing. So if you remember with loops, there's this word called continue. So continue, right? It's sort of like, it sort of does similar job. It sort of does a similar job to go to keyword. If you remember when you're doing go to keyword, using the go to keyword for the if statement, it means it's going to go to that condition. So continue, we'll skip anything else and then go straight here. And when it skips, remember currently CH option has the value X. And then if it happens to be true here, then our loop stops. So that's all I have to write here. Just say continue, done. Because like I said, when you enter X, nothing should happen. We should actually stop the loop. And here we have a condition that stops the loop when the user enters X. But while the user hasn't entered the value X, whether a small letter one or an uppercase letter one, while they haven't entered that value, continue asking them for more options. But then this is incomplete. Because if I only put the switch statement here, there's my code for asking outside. It won't be repeated, which is a problem. So I need to put it inside the loop so that it's also repeated. So I'm going to put it here. And then we need to make our code look pretty. And then tab. And then there's the while loop, right? So there's my while loop and there's my switch statements. So to show you, let me run, right? Let me show you. So enter your choice. Let's say you start by entering X, right? Remember, I used the do while loop, so that's why it's running at least once. If I had used the while loop, it wouldn't have run at all. Why? Because if I go back here, CH is currently null. It's empty. So if I change this around and use a while loop, it wouldn't even have run. That's why I'm saying a do while loop is the only one that could be used here. So that's why I use the do while loop. So that it asks the user for an option at least once. So let's say you entered X, you want to exit. Okay, it's not exiting. I knew this would happen. It's the condition. You see here, there's something that I'm not doing right. Let me think about it. While CH, so do this while CH option is not equals to X. Yeah, I was supposed to use an end. I think I was supposed to use an end. Yeah, I remember making the same mistake. If it's not equals to any of those, so I'm gonna enter X and then yeah, I was supposed to use the end, not all. So you see it exits immediately because, but then it ran at least once. That's the beauty part about do while loop. Then I'm gonna choose other options. You see that if I choose other options, it continues to run. Let's say A. Remember, I haven't written the code for A, so that's why it does nothing. Let's say B. It will continue running until you enter X. Then let's say I decide to enter X, and then it stops. That's why the practical said X when you enter the option X, the program must exit. So that's why that X option was there, so to exit. I don't know why I didn't think about that, but yeah, now you know. So yeah, there's our options: exit the program, output spelling error, output the sum of n, what numbers, right? So let's output the sequence. Let's try to output the sequence, right? So this part here, we output the sequence, right? So let's look at our practical. So your program must output the following sequence. The number of terms in the sequence is given by the user. Oh, so they gave you you enter the number of terms, then it outputs those number of terms from that sequence. So we should actually find the general formula for the sequence. Takes you back to high school. Then once you find T of n, then you do the outputting of those sequences. But before I do that, before I output the sequence, I need to do this. I need to get the number of terms. Remember, you need to validate all these values. I'm not going to do that. I don't have time for that. The session is going to be way too long if I try to validate values. So I'm going to just get the number. So I'm going to call it number of terms. Initialize it to 0 first. Then I'm going to output enter the number of terms. And remember, we don't want to, when you're getting input, we want the user to be able to type on the same line. Don't put end of line character here. Don't put it there. Then cin to get the number of terms. But then remember, for your practical, you must test and validate everything. So this ch option, make sure it has a valid value. So do about if cin.fail, all those checks. Everywhere where there's a cin, check if the input failed. For your practical, me, I'm not gonna do that because I don't have time. Like I said, time's not on our side. So what would be the general formula for this? I don't know. Let me see the difference. Is it geometric or what? Let me see. 3 divided by, let me see, 3 divided by 1, that's 3. 6 divided by 3, that's 2. 2 divided by 3, that's 1 over 3. I don't know. Let me ask ChatGPT. I don't have time for that, for writing down this general formula. Hopefully ChatGPT is not stupid, because when it comes to maths, ChatGPT is very stupid. But it's fine. Let's see. This shouldn't fail to do this. Come up. I don't have time to be taking you guys to maths. You guys know maths. Come up with the general formula for this sequence. I don't want to analyze, just give me the answer. Oh, I'm thinking about it. Let me see. 1, 6. Nah. Okay, but given the irregularity, you see, I told you, ChatGPT doesn't know what it's doing. What sequence here is given? The number of terms in the sequence is given by the use. ChatGPT doesn't even know what it's doing. So let me just copy that for. I don't want the code. I'll tell it I don't want code. I need the formula. So that it doesn't give us code. Yeah, you'd have to sit down and what. Oh, the general term applies. If n is even, the number appears to be derived from a decreasing pattern. Here, summation of new values. When the value is new, having for repetition, eh, as practical as chowing us. If you couldn't even output the simple sequence here, there's this formula. It says there's an irregularity. Let me think. If you guys can come up with a general formula, that would be highly appreciated. I don't have time to calculate this thing. 136271. Okay, some numbers are being repeated here. Yeah, this was a very difficult practical in terms of the math part, but the rest is fine. I think I might not even do the sequence because I don't have time to be coming up with this thing. Where's the general? Okay, for n, for example, for n is equals to, but I don't think they're doing the right thing. Nah, it's 136, not 19. Minus n, if n minus 1 is greater than n, else, yeah, I don't know. I don't have time for that. You can find out the general formula, but I don't have time for that. So since I don't have time for that, I'm probably not gonna explain too much. Yeah, because I don't have time. This thing is complicated. It's not a formula that you can just come up now on the fly. I can't just think of it now. I'd have to sit down, put in the terms, divide or subtract if I have to subtract, then look at it. But then let me try to analyze it. So this will be T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. I don't see the pattern in my head. I can't see the pattern. You have to sit down and actually do it. Yeah, so far, but we can reverse the string. Let's do the reversing the string part. The rest, don't know. Okay, for uppercase letters, right? I have to put in things to explain, especially option C, even for you guys. You have one thing or two things to do: reverse the string and capitalize the letters. I don't know how they expect you to find out that, but that's kind of complicated to capitalize the string. Not really, but it's like for first year, it's like kind of asking a bit too much, but it's fine. Your program must output a string in reverse version. So let's do option C because the general term, maybe while you're doing option C. Some of you guys can come up with a general term. I don't know. So I'm going to say string. I'm going to say str input. And then I'll just initialize it to an empty string, right? You can set it to things like null or whatever, but then that's not really safe. Let's not do that. So I'm going to output and say enter the string to reverse, right? And then don't put the ENDL, right? Don't put that. And we want to reverse the string. And if you look at the question, now I understand what the question was talking about. They said the program must be able to handle a string that can potentially contain spaces. They mean that you need to get the whole line. I want you to listen to the term, to the words that I use. They say you should get that whole line. It's actually very simple to get the whole line. You use a function called getLine. That's why sometimes you need to understand English. English is very important. You might not see the importance, but it's very important to understand. Then you pass in the stream object as the first parameter. Second parameter is the string itself. So str input. So it's going to go inside cin, it gets that whole line, and then stores it inside str input. And then I've gotten the whole line, even if it can include spaces, which is fine. Now it's time to reverse the string. How can we reverse the string? Let me show you let me see. There's a lot of let me show you the long way, or let me show you maybe I can show you both ways. Let me teach you a trick. If you forgot the language, it's C++, right? You forgot the syntax and those things, you can go to cppreference.com. cppreference.com. You go there, you click the link, right? So this is everything, part of C++. Everything you need to know about C++. Everything is here. Like you see, there's your for loop, while loop, do while loop. If you forgot the syntax, switch. If you forgot constants, all those things, it's there. But what am I looking for here? I'm looking for a string. I don't know. I don't know. For some weird reason, this website is missing some things because I tried looking for the strings here. I couldn't find it. The one that I was looking for. C++ 17. Okay. Not really important. But it seems like I can only go to here, basic string. So you're going to click there on basic string. Some of the functions are, yeah, it's fine. Yes, some of the functions are actually there. So you have equals, which assigns a value to the string. Then you can use assign to assign characters or assign range. Or that doesn't really matter. You can use the add function to get a character, right? It accesses the character at a specific index. So this is where you'd use a for loop, right? You can use this add, or you can use square brackets. That's up to you. So there's some important functions that you need to know. Yeah, these functions here. See capacity. It means how many letters are in the string. We can call the size function or the length function. They do the same thing. So you see, to call it, you provide that name and empty brackets. So that's how we're going to do that. So I'm going to use a for loop. There's also a method for a for each loop, which is shorter, but we'll do that later. So for a for loop, right? Int I starting at 0, always start at 0 because strings, the positions, they start at 0. So let me teach you something. I'm using a while loop because a string has position. The letters in string have positions. So for example, if I have hello world like this, H is at index 1, this is at index 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. That space is at index 6, and then 7, 8, 9, and then L is at index 10, D is at index 11. So each letter has a position And to get each letter, we use the string name, for example, str input. There's two ways to get the letter. You can use square brackets like this, and then you provide the number for the letter or the position for the letter. Position 0 would return H. Position 11 will return D. Or you can say dot at, which means go to the string and then get a character, a letter at that position 0. So there's two ways you can do that. So I'm going to choose the at position, the at way. But before I do that, there's also another important function called length, right? You can say dot length to get how many letters are there. In this case, hello world is 12 letters. So that will return 12. So I'm going to say my string str input dot length, or you can say size, that's up to you, I plus plus. So let me see if I say size. Yeah, you can use size though. That's up to you, size or length. But I think size, let's just stick to size. Then you can now try to reverse the string, right? But then before I do that, I forgot should be I is less than. Remember, this part should return a Boolean or a true or false. So I need to have things like less than, greater than, less than or equals to, greater than or equals to, because all of those, they return at the Boolean value, true or false. So I'm going to keep checking doing this, but then this is not the way I want to do it, because in this way, right, I'm starting at index 0, position 0, going in that direction. So I want you to think of it as like I start here, I get H, I get E, I get L, I get L, I get O. So I'm moving forward. To reverse, I need to move in the opposite direction. So I need to start at the end. I output D, I output L, I output R, and so forth until I get to H. But then before we fix that, let me show you that this is actually moving forward. So I'm going to say cout str input and then dot add. So get that letter at index what? I. Because remember, it will be updated. It will start at 0 and then it will always be incremented, increased by 1. As long as I is less than the number of letters in the string. Remember, there's 12. And the last position in our string is position 11. So there's no position 12. So when I becomes 12, it stops. This becomes false. Then the loop stops. So get this is a letter at that position I, and then semicolon, done. I'm not going to put an end of line character because now it's going to put the letters in their own line. I don't want that. So let's choose option C. Um, what's going on here? Something is not right. Let me just double check something in my code. You output this, and then you output the user to enter a choice. Then the user enters a choice, right? And then after they enter the choice, if it's C, then it's that, which is fine. Okay, before I do that, let me do this. Okay, before I ask the user for the input, here, let me try to put an end of line character here. I don't know what's going on. Why? What was that? What was that error? I don't even understand why it's doing that. So C, yeah, you see, it outputs enter the string that you want to reverse, but it's not giving me the option to get the input. What am I missing here? I do have breaks everywhere. They are fine. Yeah, breaks are there. Yeah, I don't know whether it's my laptop. My laptop has been having issues. I'm trying to understand why. My laptop has been having issues. I don't know why it's doing that. So let me say C in str input. Let's do this instead. I don't know. My laptop has been having issues. I don't know what's going on. So let me enter C. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my laptop. I really don't know. My laptop has been having weird issues these days. So let me just say hello. Right, so You see, there's that hello there. So I need to output an end of line character. You see why formatting your output is very important. So I need to put in cout endl here. So that you can see, okay, let me put two of them. I want to format my output to look better, like to look prop. So this will be C, then I'm gonna say vortex, and then boom. So there's the string, right? But you see that's moving forward. So I output back the same string. I want to move backwards. So I want to start at the end. So remember here, you are initializing, you are declaring the variable, and number two, giving it a starting point. Where should it start? So I want to start at the last position. Remember size, when you call the size function, right? It's gonna return how many characters are there. But if it returns how many characters are there, we're gonna have an error because it always returns a number that's greater that is one, that it is the integer one extra. So what do I mean by that? There's 12 letters here. So this is me initializing it to 12 in a way, like this. But then if you check here, is there position 12? No, it's not there. So I would have to subtract, I would have to say 12 minus 1, just to subtract 1, so that I get the maximum position, which is position 11. So that's why when I call this function here, I'm going to say subtract 1. That's why I'm subtracting that 1 there. Or else it's going to start at a position that does not exist. But then see, if I'm starting from this position and I'm going in that direction, that means that, think of it in terms of numbers. So if I'm starting at 11, then 10, then 9, then 8, then 7, then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? What is the difference here? It's minus 1. So I subtract minus 1. So instead of I plus plus, I need to say I minus minus. But then one last thing that needs to change is here, my condition. It's no longer I is less than the size. Now, as long as I is greater than or equals to 0. Because if I keep subtracting 1, I'm going to eventually get to a negative number. Because if this is 3, 2, 1, 0. But then remember that it should stop at exactly 0. So that's why it's including 0. If it starts moving to negatives, then exit, the loop should stop. So this will now reverse the string because I'm moving in the opposite direction. So if we look at the position positions, if I'm starting at position 11, what's the letter there? It's D. What is okay, let me put them together like this. Okay, it doesn't look pretty like this. Let me do this instead. If I move from the end, this is what I would get. So I would have this, and then this would be D, L, R, O, W, and so forth. You see that the string is reversed because I'm starting from the end, going into that direction. So I'm moving backwards. So that actually reverses the string. So I'm going to build and run. You're going to use getLine. I don't know. On my code, I don't know what's going on with my computer, to be honest. It's crashing. Something is not right. So getLine on my side doesn't want to work. So enter option C. So I'm going to say hello. And then boom, it reversed the string. Magic, right? Yeah, if it's not really magic if you understand what you're doing. Let's enter a different string to test. So vortex, and then boom, it reversed the string. And then X to exit. Then we exit because we are done. So that's how you reverse the string. That's method number 1. Method number 2, it will kind of take time to explain. Let me not get to method number 2. Let's leave method number 2. Method number 2 is a bit, yeah, you have to really think for method number 2. So this is how you would reverse the string. Just this for loop over here, this for loop. But then if you want, let me check something in the practical. if you want to reverse the string using a for each loop, you can do that. That's also allowed. That's up to you. So another way to reverse the string, right, is to use that for each loop that we're talking about. Remember, at each position, we get back a char. So that's why I'm going to use char type here. At each position, we get back the char. And then what's my string? It's str input. Now, if I'm getting back a char, how do I reverse this thing, right? It's kind of a lot of work. You have to create another string, and this will be the reversed string, right? Let's say it's empty, right? Make sure it's empty. You see, it's empty. Don't put even spaces. Just leave it like that. To reverse the string, right? Remember, you can do this. You can say reversed is equals to reversed plus the current character, right? Just like we're doing when we do when just like when we do, just like how we do when we're adding things. So if my string is currently empty, and then I add the next character, let's say H. Now this string becomes just H. And then if I add E, now it becomes HE. And I add L, it becomes that L becomes L and then O and then so forth, right? But I can, you see, it's doing it in this way because of the order of addition. If I flip these things around, it actually reverses the string. So if I start by saying C first plus the current string, it actually reverses the string. So let me show you that. So let's say we're starting at H, right? It's currently H, then I'm going to have H, right? So my string is currently H. Then I add the next letter, which is, oh no, it's D. We're starting at the, no, we're starting at the beginning. Yeah, we're starting at the beginning, right? Yeah. So it's H, right? Then we have E, but then remember the C, I'm adding it behind. Do you see that the C is behind the string? So that means I'll add the E here. What is this gonna be? It's gonna be E here plus this, which actually gives me E, H. And then I keep adding behind it. I add L, behind it, I add L, again behind it, I add O, behind it. So that's hello, right? But reversed. Then I add the comma, I add the space, and then I add, what is this, W, I add, and so forth. So it eventually reverses the string. So it's kind of, I hope you can somewhat picture it. It's kind of straightforward, but also kind of difficult to understand if you can picture it in your mind. It actually does reverses the string. So I'm gonna build and run, then C, then vortex, boom, still reverses the string. There's two ways, right? It's up to you which approach you wanna use. Then I'm gonna press X to exit the program, and then exits. So your practical is exactly similar to this. Just difference is the sequence. The general term that you're entering is a bit different. In my case, I didn't wanna think of the general formula because it seems like this one is showing you can't just get the answer straightforward. You have to sit down and calculate it, maybe with a pen and pencil and paper. And here, right, remember they said you should accommodate for lines. So you should use get line. So get line. And you have cin and then str input. That's how you should use it to get that whole line. In my case, I don't know what's going on, to be honest. I don't know. My laptop has been shaking, acting, it's weird. So you see, it skips entirely. It skipped it entirely. I don't know why. So I'm also still trying to understand why it's doing that. I'll try restarting my laptop. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm just checking the getLine method. Parameters, delim, which is the delimiter. Yeah, you can actually, you can also, I remember specifying it. there's that thing that Dr. Stung always specifies, the whole numeric limits. So this is what we call ignoring all leftovers characters, all leftover characters on the line of input. Yeah, so I'm going to do this. And then here you can just put in what you call a delimiter. So it's gonna basically where it should stop. It should stop when it says \n. So I'm gonna run and then let's say C. Yeah, for me it does wanna run. I think on your side it will run if I send you guys the code. So that's pretty much how you can reverse string. This is method number 2. The first method I showed you, you can just watch the recording. I'll just record and send it in the group. The sequence is pretty straightforward. You're just using for loop or this for loop or do while loop or while loop. That's up to you. But then for here, you know exactly how many terms are there. So a for loop is what you should use. And then here, you're supposed to do, even if for your practical, it's similar. Okay, here just calculating the sum. So I can use a while loop for that. And then option C, I use the for each loop. So basically the practical, you've used every option, every loop. Yeah, so that's pretty much how you should approach the practical. So I will share the code right now in the group chat. Okay, so this is the other option, right? Okay, let me leave this option. Just use this approach. Even if you guys all write the same code, it's fine. Just name your variables differently. If I've named mine reversed, maybe call yours R. I don't know. Let's use a different name. Or else if you use the exact same name, if it's exactly the same like this, it's gonna say copy and you get a 0 for practical. So that's why I'm saying don't name things the exact same way as I'm doing. Because the same way you're gonna have that funny idea to do that, someone else is going to have the same funny idea to copy and paste this code. So don't do that. You're gonna get a 0. So so that's it for today's session. Let me just stop recording and take questions if you guys have any questions. So do you guys have any questions?